cubs, juveniles, and adults. So those are my 3 age classes. That means that my top row is telling me, get rid of my L over there. My top row is telling me sort of for next year, where are my cubs coming from, where are my juveniles coming from, and where are my adults coming from. And then the columns are telling me where, so this tells me that this column is coming from my cubs, this column is coming from my juveniles, and this column is coming from my adults. So if I wanted to read the information off here, this tells me that on average, cubs produce 0 cubs each breeding cycle. On average, each juvenile produces 1 cub, and on average, each adult produces 3 cubs. So in this case, we would say that the cubs, or the age class 0 females, can't produce offspring because they're producing 0 offspring or no offspring. This 0.8 tells me that my cubs grow up to be juveniles at a rate of 80%. This 0.6 tells me my juveniles grow up to be adults at a rate of 0.6. And my adults survive to still be adults and still be around another year at a rate of 0.9. So one option, if I wanted to write this as a system of difference equations, one option is to take our matrix and to actually sketch that out into a diagram. And this is kind of what the book is doing in section 8.5. So first of all, let's look at this row. So to get my cubs, I know my cubs are coming from my juveniles and my adults. So I've got juveniles producing cubs, and they're producing on average 1 cub per juvenile. And I've got adults producing cubs, and on average, those adults are producing 3 cubs. Looking at my juveniles are coming from the cubs. So 80% of my cubs are growing up to be juveniles. So I've got cubs going to be juveniles at a rate of 80%. Then into my adults, I know I'm getting 0.6 from my juveniles. And adults are feeding back into the adults at a rate of 0.9, or 90% of my adults are surviving for another cycle. So I can diagram this out, or if I were writing this as a system of difference equations, then I'm going to have my cubs at time t plus 1, or the next cycle. I'm going to have my juveniles for the next cycle, and I'm going to have my adults for the next cycle. So my cubs, and again, when I write my difference equation, I'm only looking at, from the diagram, the arrows that are coming in, just looking at what is coming into my cubs. Or if I think about it this way, I really only care about those columns that don't have zeros. So I'm going to have 1 times my juveniles at time t plus 3 times my adults at time t. For my juveniles, the only arrow coming in is coming in from my cubs, and it's a 0.8 times my cubs at time t. And then for our bottom row here, I've got 2 arrows coming in. I've got a 0.6 coming from J, so 0.6 J sub t. And I've got this arrow cycling back on itself, so 0.9 A sub t.